Now Hughes is at the controls as the 8 engines roar and the ship gets going.
Howard Hughes once broke the world airspeed record. He built the largest airplane ever made.
The Howard Hughes flying boat has a wingspread of 320 feet.
He bought half of Las Vegas from his bed. But by the end, he weighed 93 pounds, sat naked in a dark room, and had broken needles buried in his arms. For decades, people called it madness. They said money destroyed him. They said fame ate him alive. But none of that was the real answer. Doctors, biographers, and people who worked beside him now point to something specific, something that started long before the drugs, long before the isolation. And once you hear it, everything about Howard Hughes finally makes sense. Howard Hughes came into the world wrapped in confusion, and that confusion never really left him. Even his birth date could not settle into one clear truth. One official document said he was born on December 24, 1905, in Texas. Another, a baptism record from a church in Iowa, quietly claimed September 24, 1905, with no place written at all. This small clash would later grow into something massive. When he died in 1976 without a will, more than 100 people stepped forward claiming to be his heirs. Courts fought over his fortune for years. Money drained away in legal fees, and it was not until 2010 that everything was finally divided among distant relatives and his medical institute. Long before that chaos, his family had already tasted both wealth and decline. His father, Howard Hughes Sr., changed everything with a single invention. In 1908, he built a new kind of oil drill bit with a partner, Walter Sharp. It tore through rock far faster than anything before it, earning the nickname Rock Eater. Instead of selling it, he leased it, and that simple choice turned into a gold mine. By the 1930s, his company controlled most of the world market. Money poured in, and when his father died in 1924, young Howard stepped into that fortune without really being ready for it. His mother, Aline, shaped him in a very different way. She lived in constant fear of disease, especially polio, which haunted the early 1900s. From the time he was small, she checked his body every day, his ears, his throat, even the smallest signs of illness. She made him sleep beside her, pulled him out of school whenever sickness rumors spread, and kept him close at all times. At first it looked like love. Over time, it became something else. It planted a fear inside him that never left. Years later, he would write strict instructions for people around him on how to handle even simple things like opening a can of food, as if the world itself carried danger in every touch. Still, there was something bright in him as a child. At just 12 years old, he built a motorized bicycle from scraps. It was not a toy. It worked. A newspaper even ran a story about the boy riding through Houston. Before that, he had already built a wireless radio and earned a license. Machines made sense to him in a way people did not. School did not hold his interest much, except for numbers and mechanics. But when he worked with his hands, everything seemed to click into place. Then, at 14, something strange happened. His legs stopped working. No clear cause, no visible injury. For months, he could not walk, and doctors had no answers. And then, just as suddenly, it disappeared. Looking back, many believe it came from stress and fear, something rooted deep in his mind. At the time, it only added to the sense that his body could fail him at any moment. Around that same age, he found something that would shape his life in a completely different way. He took his first flying lesson. Aviation was still new, still raw, and full of risk. That did not stop him. He became obsessed. Years later, he would design and fly planes that pushed limits others would not even approach. Speed records fell. Giant aircraft took shape under his direction, and yet every step forward came with danger.
I put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation rolled up in it.
Crashes would follow him. each one leaving marks on his body that never fully healed. Then life struck him harder than anything before. In 1922, his mother died suddenly at just 38. She had been his constant presence, his shield, even his control. Losing her left a hollow space that nothing could fill. Just 2 years later, in 1924, his father collapsed and died in his office. In the span of a short time, Howard Hughes went from a protected son to an orphan with a massive fortune. At 18, he already owned most of his father's company. At 19, he made a bold move that shocked everyone around him. He went to court and convinced a judge to declare him legally an adult, even though the law said he had to wait until 21. That single decision gave him full control over millions of dollars. Relatives who might have stepped in were pushed aside as he quietly bought out their shares. Within a year, the entire company belonged to him. With money in his hands and no one left to guide him, he turned his eyes towards something bigger. He left for Hollywood, not to settle, but to conquer. He married Ella Rice, but his focus was not on building a calm life. He wanted to become the greatest filmmaker in America. He poured money into movies, sometimes wasting it, sometimes hitting success. One film would fail and disappear. Another would win awards. He spent huge amounts chasing perfection, even putting lives at risk during dangerous filming. At the same time, his personal life became just as intense. He moved from one relationship to another, drawn to famous actresses and socialites, always searching, never settling. He even paid large sums of money to break apart relationships if it meant getting closer to someone he wanted. For him, money was not just power, it was control. One of his most famous projects, The Outlaw, turned into a scandal before it even reached theaters. He focused heavily on the image of actress Jane Russell, even designing a special bra for her. Censors blocked the film again and again, calling it too suggestive. Instead of backing down, Hughes leaned into the controversy. He delayed the release and used the ban as promotion. When the film finally came out, people rushed to see what all the noise was about. But while Hollywood fed his ambition, aviation fed something deeper inside him. In 1935, he flew a plane he had designed himself and broke the world airspeed record. 2 years later, he flew across the United States in record time. And soon after that, he circled the globe faster than anyone before him. Crowds celebrated him as a hero. Parades filled the streets. He stood at the center of it all, a man who seemed unstoppable. Yet behind that image, the cracks were already forming. The same man who chased speed and risk also carried fear, pain, and growing instability. His crashes became more serious, his injuries more severe. In 1946, one crash nearly killed him. His body was broken, his lungs damaged, his skin burned. Doctors were not sure he would survive. He did survive, but something changed. The man who walked out of that hospital was not the same one who had gone in. Pain stayed with him, and so did the drugs used to treat it. What began as relief slowly turned into dependence. His mind became clouded, his habits more extreme. He started pulling away from people, building walls around himself, both physical and mental. Over time, the bold pilot and wealthy filmmaker faded into someone almost unrecognizable. The energy that once pushed him forward now turned inward. Fear grew stronger. Control became tighter, and the life that had once seemed so full of motion slowly narrowed into isolation. By the time Howard Hughes was fighting for the future of the H-4 Hercules, the airplane itself already felt unreal. It was so large that people struggled to describe it without borrowing the size of other things. Its wingspan stretched 320 feet 11 inches, which made it longer than a football field. It stood 79 feet 4 inches tall, more than 5 stories high, and ran 218 feet 8 inches from nose to tail. In drawings, it dwarfed B-17 bombers and even made later cargo giants look small. For years, It remained the largest airplane ever built, a title it held until 2019. And what made it even stranger was that this giant was built mostly from birchwood, not because Hughes wanted novelty, but because World War II had made metal scarce. So the aircraft was shaped through the Duramold process, layer by layer, into a flying machine that looked less like a normal plane and more like a challenge thrown at nature itself. Everything about it was extreme. 8 Pratt & Whitney R4360 radial engines, each producing 3,000 horsepower, turned 17-foot propellers. The planned cruise speed was 250 miles per hour. The planned range was 3,000 miles. It was meant to carry 750 troops across the Atlantic, or even 2 30-ton Sherman tanks, all while avoiding the U-boat threat below. Empty, it weighed 250,000 pounds. Fully loaded, it could reach 400,000. Hughes poured $23 million into it, which would be about $253 million today. The project had begun in 1942 with shipbuilding magnate Henry Kaiser under an $18 million government contract. But by 1944, Kaiser had walked away, frustrated by delays and by Hughes's refusal to cut corners. Even after the war ended in 1945, Hughes kept going. That choice made him look stubborn to some people, delusional to others, and dangerous to men in Washington who wanted answers. That tension exploded on August 6, 1947, when Senator Owen Brewster of Maine attacked the project before the Senate War Investigating Committee. He mocked the Spruce Goose as a flying lumberyard and said it will never fly. The words landed hard because they were spoken in a room already charged with anger over money, delays, and pride. The hearings lasted 5 days in a humid Senate caucus room packed with 1-200 spectators. Klieg lights burned overhead. 6 movie cameras turned the whole thing into a national spectacle. Hughes was being pressed over failure to meet the 1944 deadline, over wartime spending that now looked pointless in peacetime, and over accusations that nearly $40 million in government money had been wasted. Brewster pushed aggressively, and behind that push sat another fight entirely, because Hughes believed Brewster was helping Pan Am gain a monopoly on international routes, which threatened TWA, the airline where Hughes owned 46%. Hughes could have played defense. Most people expected him to. Instead, he came in swinging. From August 6th through August 11th, 1947, he flipped the whole hearing upside down. He said Brewster had approached him at a lunch in the Mayflower Hotel during the week of February 10, 1947, and offered a deal in plain terms. Merge TWA with Pan Am, support the airline bill, make the hearings disappear. Hughes quoted the proposal as directly as he could, and in that moment, the room changed. The senator who had tried to paint Hughes as reckless and dishonest suddenly looked like a man caught in his own game. Hughes did not sound meek. He sounded furious. He said the Hercules had the sweat of my life in it. He said his whole reputation was rolled into that airplane. He even declared that if it failed, he would leave the United States and never come back. From there, the hearing slid into chaos. Reporters raced to catch every word. Flashbulbs kept going off. The committee lost control of the story. Instead of watching a rich man squirm, the public watched him accuse a senator of corruption in front of the nation. The transcript ran to roughly 50,000 words. Newspaper coverage made Hughes look bold, and Brewster look petty. Polls later showed public opinion breaking for Hughes by about 80 to 20. The probe that was supposed to bury him ended up lifting him, and Hughes, who had spent 5 straight days testifying without backing down, walked out of the hearing room with something he had not had when he entered it: momentum. Still, words were not enough. Hughes needed the airplane to do the one thing Brewster said it never would. So 3 months later, on November 2, 1947, in Long Beach Harbor, he made his move. Around 50,000 people gathered to watch. There were 36 people aboard, including 7 reporters. The first 2 taxi runs stayed low and cautious. Then came the third. The aircraft hit 135 miles per hour with 15 degrees of flap, and suddenly, the giant wooden machine lifted off the water. It rose about 70 feet into the air, stayed up for 26 seconds, and traveled about a mile in ground effect. At one point, it reached 129 kilometers per hour and about 21 meters of altitude. The engines roared with a combined 24,000 horsepower. The crowd stared as the plane skimmed low over the harbor, and just like that, the laughter around "it will never fly" died. Hughes later told a reporter, "I like to make surprises." He had done exactly that. It was only one flight, and it never flew again. But that one flight mattered. It came exactly 3 months after Brewster's attack, and it proved the wooden giant could leave the water and stay in the air. For Hughes, that was enough to turn mockery into vindication. For everyone else, it became one of the strangest triumphs in aviation history. The airplane had come too late for war. It had cost a fortune. It had no practical future. And yet for one brief stretch above Long Beach, it had worked. After that, the Hercules turned from machine into monument. Hughes kept it in a climate-controlled hangar in Long Beach at a cost of about $1 million a year until his death in 1976. At first, a crew of 300 maintained it. Later, that number dropped to around 50, but the mission stayed the same. Keep it ready, keep it secretive, keep it alive. For nearly 3 decades, money kept flowing into a plane that never flew again. After Hughes died, Summa Corporation planned to break it apart for museum display. But the aircraft survived that too. In 1980, the Aero Club displayed it in a dome near the Queen Mary. Then, in 1993, it made a 1,055-mile journey by barge and train to Oregon's Evergreen Museum. Today, visitors can walk up to the cockpit of this giant survivor. And in 2024, it was listed on the National Register. By then, the Hercules no longer looked like a military project or a political scandal. It looked like something else entirely. A monument to brilliance, pride, and a refusal to let go. That same refusal shaped the next chapter of Hughes's life. And this time, it was not about one airplane. It was about an entire airline industry. As TWA's controlling force through Hughes Tool Company, Hughes pushed the company into the jet age with the same intensity he had once poured into racing planes and flying boats. He did not want TWA to keep pace with rivals. He wanted it to leap ahead of them. So he pushed for Boeing 707s, and on March 28, 1956, he placed a bold order for 30 Convair 880 jets, aiming to give TWA the fastest fleet in the skies. It was an aggressive gamble. Hughes Tool Company put down only a small deposit, but the structure of the deal gave him exclusive leverage, while burdening TWA with expensive lease terms. That opened the door to furious lawsuits from minority shareholders, who argued that Hughes was inflating prices and using the airline for personal advantage. What looked visionary from one angle looked self-dealing from another. And while his push helped drag American aviation out of the propeller era faster than it might have moved on its own, it also pulled TWA into a costly legal war that would end with Hughes losing control in 1961 after antitrust battles and shareholder pressure. Even so, his impact held. The 30 Convair 880s entered service and flew from 1961 to 1974, helping cement TWA's image as a jet-age pioneer. Hughes had forced change, but as always, he had done it in the most expensive and disruptive way possible. Then came the clean break. On May 4, 1966, Hughes sold his entire TWA stake in one astonishing hour. The sale covered 6,584,937 shares and moved through 404 investment banks led by Merrill Lynch. At $86 a share, the total came to exactly $566,304,582. After fees, he pocketed about $83 per share. Overnight, he became one of the richest men in America in pure cash. And he did it in a way that also helped him avoid California taxes. But Hughes rarely sat still after a giant payday. He turned money into motion almost immediately. That same year, on Thanksgiving night, November 24, 1966, He rolled into Las Vegas by private train from Boston as the sole passenger. He was on a stretcher. He wore blue pajamas. He took a service elevator to the 9th-floor penthouse of the Desert Inn, planning to stay for 10 days. He never really left. When the owners told him in December that he needed to give up the suite for important holiday gamblers, Hughes responded in the most Hughes way possible. He bought the entire hotel casino. The price was $13.2 million, far above market value, and the deal was done from the darkness of his suite, without him even going downstairs. His aides, the men later called the Mormon Mafia, handled the paperwork while Hughes stayed hidden. With that one purchase, he announced a new phase of his life. He had left airlines behind. Now he was buying Las Vegas. From that 9th-floor penthouse, he began swallowing huge pieces of the Strip. Between 1967 and 1969, he bought the Sands for $23 million, the Frontier for $23 million, the Castaways for $3.3 million in July 1968, the Silver Slipper for $5.4 million in 1968, and the Landmark for $17.3 million in July 1968. In all, he spent more than $300 million in 4 years, averaging around $175,000 a day during 1967 alone. At one point, he controlled around 20% of Strip hotel rooms and nearly 2,000 hotel units, and he did it without gambling, without seeing the shows, and often without even setting foot on the casino floors he owned. Everything happened through aides, telephones, notes, and cash. That flood of money changed the city. Mob-linked figures like Mo Dalitz suddenly had a clean exit. Hughes paid premiums that let them walk away rich, and without the same pressure from federal investigators. By buying properties tied to organized crime and replacing their image with that of a respectable billionaire, Hughes helped transform Las Vegas from a gangster playground into something that could be sold to banks, corporations, and middle-class tourists. Nevada politicians used his presence as cover to reshape regulation, and his buying spree helped clear the way for the 1969 Corporate Gaming Act, which pushed the city further from underworld control and further toward boardrooms. Historians later said Hughes accomplished with money what the FBI had struggled to do for years. He bought the mob out. Still, even Hughes could not buy everything. In late 1968, he tried to acquire the Stardust for somewhere between $30.5 million and $40 million, but by then, regulators were alarmed. He already controlled too much of the Strip. Nevada gaming officials and federal authorities, backed by Governor Paul Laxalt, worried that one man was building a monopoly over the city's core industry. The deal collapsed. Summa Corporation, his holding company, had to stop the spree. That marked the end of his attempt to dominate Las Vegas completely. In November 1970, after years of living in hidden rooms, while nuclear testing rattled his windows and concerns over Lake Mead's sewage supply added to his paranoia, Hughes slipped out of Vegas the way he had arrived, quietly, on a stretcher, headed for the Bahamas. What made all of this even stranger was the condition he was in while doing it. During those Vegas years, Hughes was sinking deeper into addiction, illness, and self-destruction. He took heavy amounts of codeine every day, often between 20 and 45 grains, for pain left over from the terrible 1946 plane crash that had fractured his neck, collapsed vertebrae, and burned him from hip to shoulder. He crushed pills into syringes and injected them when he could. Needles broke in his arms and stayed there. His diet narrowed into bizarre habits. He became obsessed with Baskin-Robbins banana nut ice cream and had 350 gallons shipped from a Los Angeles factory after the flavor was discontinued. Later, he switched to French vanilla, leaving hotels stuck with huge supplies of the earlier flavor, which they sometimes gave away to casino guests. He also ate chicken soup brought by aides. In his darkened rooms, he often sat naked in a chair, used tissue boxes to cover door handles, bathed rarely, cut his hair and nails only about once a year, and let both grow to grotesque lengths. By the time he died in 1976, This once glamorous billionaire weighed only 93 pounds. And yet, even while his body and mind were deteriorating, the financial engine behind all of it kept running. That engine was Hughes Tool Company. In his final years, Hughes's compulsions became so severe that daily life turned into ritual theater. Aides had to wear white gloves. Anything he touched had to be wrapped in Kleenex, sometimes around 50 tissues folded in a precise way, so his skin would never meet the object itself. Hand washing followed exact sequences that could take many minutes. Staff were forbidden to look him in the eye. In darkened hotel rooms, he sat inside what he treated as a sealed clean zone and watched the same movie again and again, often Ice Station Zebra, replaying it until the film itself seemed caught in the same trapped loop as his mind. These were not harmless eccentricities anymore. They were the behavior of a man imprisoned by contamination fears and ritualized control. That prison may have had more than one builder. Biographers and clinicians later argued that Hughes likely suffered from neurosyphilis for decades, perhaps beginning in the 1930s. He reportedly underwent painful treatment in that era. But if the infection returned in his nervous system, it could have slowly damaged his brain over many years. Neurosyphilis can bring paranoia, confusion, hallucinations, and dramatic personality changes. Looking back, those symptoms fit too much of what people around Hughes described. His cruelty, suspicion, irrational terror, and bizarre hoarding may not have come from obsession alone. They may have come from obsession colliding with disease. And then there were the injuries. Hughes survived at least 14 serious plane and car crashes. Each one battered his body. Some battered his brain. The most devastating was the 1946 XF-11 crash in Beverly Hills, when he barely survived a fiery wreck that crushed his chest, broke ribs, collapsed a lung, and shifted his heart. Modern medicine understands cumulative traumatic brain injury far better than doctors did in Hughes's lifetime. Repeated blows can damage the frontal lobes, weaken judgment, amplify paranoia, and destroy emotional control. Hughes lived through all of that without ever really receiving the kind of treatment that might have helped. Instead, he was flooded with painkillers, and the addiction that followed wrapped itself around every other problem he had. He died on April 5, 1976, aboard a private plane flying from Mexico to Houston. He was 70 years old. His body weighed only about 93 to 94 pounds on a 6'4" frame. Broken hypodermic needles were found embedded in his arms. He was suffering from severe malnutrition, kidney failure, and a toxic burden of drugs such as codeine. He did not die like a titan. He died like a man who had been left to waste away in plain sight. The most haunting detail came after death. When his body reached Houston, authorities could not identify him by sight. Even fingerprints initially failed to settle it cleanly. Years of starvation, neglect, and bizarre living conditions had changed him so much that the handsome aviator who once filled magazines seemed gone. The FBI had to step in and use old records to confirm that the skeletal figure on the table was, in fact, Howard Hughes. It was a brutal final image. First, he vanished from public life. Then he almost vanished from his own face.